She was dragged into town in chains, but the sheriff's son cut her loose at midnight. They dragged her through the dust at high noon, iron at her wrists, blood in her boot prints. Two men on either side held the chain between her cuffs like reins. Her chin was up, though her lip was split, and her dress torn at the hem. The street went quiet, except for the clink of metal and the shuffle of boots. Flies followed. Some whispered, "Murderer," others, "Witch." A woman covered her child's eyes. A man spit near her feet, but she didn't look at any of them. Her eyes were fixed straight ahead, toward the old jailhouse with its crooked porch rail and the warped door that had once held drunks, not girls like her. Eli stood in the shadow of the stable, arms crossed, heart thudding too loud. The badge on his chest wasn't real, just one his father made him wear to learn the ropes. He hadn't asked for it. When they passed him, she turned her head slightly, just enough. Her eyes locked with his. Not long, not pleading, just enough to make his ribs ache, just enough to say she knew something he didn't. The jail door creaked. One of the men barked, "Move." She did. Eli didn't, couldn't. The dust hung in the air like breath that wouldn't come out. Something about her, bloodied, bound, but unbroken, felt heavier than iron. The door shut behind her. The town exhaled, but Eli stayed where he was, hand on his belt, eyes on the jail. The wind kicked up. Her boot prints began to fade, but not for him. The jailhouse creaked louder at night. Wind slipped through the warped boards, dragging dust and whispers across the floor. Eli sat on the porch rail, boot heel tapping slow. Inside, she hadn't moved. Not since they locked her in. Her silhouette flickered in lamplight through the bars. She sat upright on the cot, wrists still chained, ankles too, like they expected her to shift into something worse. The sheriff snored from his back room. Cards clinked in the deputy's hands, restless, bored. But Eli didn't go in. He just sat, watching the moon move inch by inch across the floorboards. Around midnight, the lantern sputtered. She looked up, just once. Her eyes caught him through the window. That same look, steady, unreadable. It didn't ask for help. It asked for truth. Eli swallowed hard, reached into his pocket, touched the old key he wasn't supposed to have. Not yet, not ever. He didn't know why he'd taken it. Habit, maybe, or something worse. He stood, boots quiet against the wood, stepped to the door, listened. Silence. Inside, her breath was shallow. Her lips were cracked, but her back was still straight. Eli opened the door slow. It groaned like it was warning him. She didn't flinch. He walked to her cell, held the key up between them. She looked at it, then at him. He didn't speak, just slid it into the lock. It turned with a soft click. Still, he hesitated. "You sure?" she asked, voice low, rough from thirst. Eli nodded once, then she stood, and the chain fell like a verdict. The key turned easier than it should have. The door groaned open, slow and uncertain, like even the metal knew what this meant. Sabria didn't wait for permission. She stepped out, barefoot, shackles still clinging to her ankles like ghosts that hadn't let go yet. Eli moved fast, crouched beside her, worked at the locks. His hands weren't shaking, but his breath was. The cuffs dropped with a dull clatter against the floorboards. Her skin beneath them was raw, welted deep. She didn't wince. Outside, the wind had changed, carried dust from the east, and the smell of horses left too long in sun. Inside, the sheriff muttered in his sleep. A bottle rolled across the floor near his cot, but he didn't stir. Sabria glanced once toward the sound, then at Eli. "You sure you're the lawman's son?" she asked. He didn't answer, just pulled a coat from the hook by the door and handed it to her. It was his, too big, frayed at the collar, warm. She slipped it on. It swallowed her, but she kept moving, toward the back. Eli led her through the pantry, past old crates and dry beans. The door there stuck, but he shouldered it open. Beyond it, dark brush, narrow trails, the smell of night blooming somewhere past the fence line. She paused. "You got a plan?" she asked. Eli looked at her, then back at the town behind them. "No," he said. "Just a direction." She nodded once. Then they ran. No goodbye, no torch, no witness. Just boots on dirt, and the sound of two hearts choosing exile over silence. They ran until their lungs burned, until the church bell struck once behind them, and the town shrank to a memory wrapped in smoke. Sabria led after the first mile, barefoot, blood trailing from one heel, but sure-footed like she'd read this ground before. Eli followed, half stumbling, half chasing something he didn't understand yet. The moon lit their way in pieces. Thornbrush scraped their legs. Somewhere behind, a dog barked. Then another, but no men. Not yet. They reached Ash Creek just as the stars began to fade. The water was low, more rock than flow, but cold enough to numb. Sabria crouched by the bank, tore strips from Eli's coat lining, and wrapped her feet without asking. Her hands moved fast, practiced. She didn't speak. Eli kept watch, heart still hammering, trying to name what he'd just done. He hadn't planned it, just saw her there, chained, eyes steady, and knew the law was lying. "Why me?" he asked finally. Sabria didn't look up. You were the only one who didn't look away. A silence hung between them, heavy as dawn, then hoofbeats, distant but closing. Sabria stood. "They'll follow the tracks." "Creek bed?" Eli asked. She nodded. They stepped into the water, boots and rags and all. It was sharp as knives. Eli hissed through his teeth. Sabria didn't make a sound. They moved downstream, half crawling, half wading, letting the current steal their trail. Behind them, the town stirred, but ahead, just wind and water, and a chance so small it almost looked like hope. Eli kept his eyes on her back as she moved, a silhouette against breaking light. He didn't know where they were going, only that she hadn't asked him to come, and he hadn't needed asking. They didn't speak until the sun was high enough to burn. Their clothes stuck wet to their backs, feet blistered, silence stretched like rope between them. They found shade beneath a tumble of boulders where the creek split into dry veins and scrub. Eli collapsed first. His breath came hard. He wasn't built for running, not like her. Sabria crouched beside a patch of thorn leaf, pulled a knife from inside her coat sleeve, small, bone-handled, sharp from care. She scraped bark, crushed it, mixed it with spit, and packed it against her heel. "You always run with strangers?" she asked without looking up. Eli leaned back against the stone. "No." "Then why this time?" He didn't answer. He didn't know. She tied a strip of cloth around her foot, then met his gaze for the first time since the jail. "My brother's dead, buried somewhere they won't mark." Eli sat up straighter. "They dragged me from the riverbank, said I cursed the fields, said I hexed the sheriff's cattle." Eli swallowed. "My father's cattle." Her eyes didn't flinch. "Then your father's a liar." He didn't argue, just looked down at his hands, dirt caked in the lines. "You killed no one." "Only silence," she said, and it screamed back. Eli let that sit. Sabria stood, scanned the canyon edge. "There's a ridge ahead, water beneath it. We can make it before dusk." "We?" he asked. She shrugged. "You already burned your bridge. Might as well see where the road ends." He nodded, pushed to his feet. As they walked, she said one more thing, not loud, not angry. "My name means patient flame." He looked sideways at her. "You don't seem patient." She didn't smile. "Then you don't know fire." The dust hadn't even settled in town before saddles creaked and spurs jingled. 3 riders, maybe 4, rode out before noon. Badges crooked, mouths sour with yesterday's drink. One of them was the sheriff. He didn't speak Eli's name, just stared at the empty cell, then at the boots missing from the porch. "They'll run for the ridge," someone muttered. "Then ride faster," the sheriff snapped. He wasn't hunting justice. He was hunting embarrassment. Back at the canyon, Sabria moved like she wasn't hunted. Her shoulders didn't flinch at every sound. Her hands stayed steady, always gathering something, roots, bark, a sprig of bitter herb tucked behind one ear. Eli, though, kept looking over his shoulder. Every gust of wind sounded like hooves, every shadow twisted wrong. "You ever get scared?" he asked. Sabria didn't stop walking. "Only when people start praying out loud." He blinked. "Why?" means they've already decided who deserves to die. The wind picked up, carried the scent of men, leather, sweat, old tobacco. Eli stiffened. "They're riding," he said. Sabria nodded. "Let them. They'll catch us." She turned, eyes sharp. "You can go back." He didn't move. "That's what I thought." They found cover in the folds of dry stone, between a ridge and a bramble patch. She knew the land like breath, mapped it without speaking. As dusk bled into purple, Eli listened to the night for footsteps. Sabria just listened to the silence. And in that silence, something changed. Not trust, not yet, but the beginning of it. Like the first spark before a blaze. Small, quiet, unmistakable. They found him near a bend in the creek, half buried in stone dust, one arm outstretched like he'd tried to crawl home. The buzzards hadn't touched him. Not yet. Maybe even they knew to keep back. Sabria dropped to her knees without a word. The boy couldn't have been more than 12. Thin, worn shoes, a stitched pouch still tied around his neck. Eli stepped closer but didn't speak. He watched her fingers brush dirt from the child's face like a mother would, tender, practiced, already grieving. She opened the pouch. Inside, a strip of red cloth and 3 dried berries. Juniper, for protection. Sabria's voice barely cracked. He was carrying medicine. For me. Eli crouched beside her. "Your brother?" She nodded once. That was all. There was a hole torn through his shirt near the ribs, blood still dark, sticky in the cotton folds. A clean shot, close range. Eli stared. "They said he stole." Sabria's jaw clenched. "He stole nothing but time. Time to find me. Time to help." The breeze stirred the grass. Neither of them moved. Eli reached into his coat, pulled out his knife, and began digging. The earth was hard, but not cruel, not like the hands that put the bullet there. Sabria helped, no tears, just motion. They buried him beneath a cedar sapling. She placed the red cloth in his palm, whispered something in a language Eli didn't recognize, but understood just the same. When they stood, her hands were shaking. She didn't hide it. Eli looked at her, at the boy now part of the earth, then toward the trail ahead. "This changes things," he said. Sabria didn't reply. She didn't have to. Everything had already changed. They walked in silence until the sun gave up and the sky bruised. Eli carried the weight of it in his chest, the boy's face, the red cloth, the smallness of the grave. Sabria didn't speak, just moved, like the earth owed her answers, and she meant to collect. At camp, she lit no fire. Just crouched in the dark, hands busy with herbs and thread, mending her heel with willow bark and spite. Eli sat against a rock, staring at the stars. "My father," he said finally, "wears his badge like a sermon, says justice don't ask permission." Sabria didn't look up. "Your father put that bullet in my brother." He swallowed. "I know." She tied off the stitching and leaned back, arms crossed, moonlight cutting across her cheek. "You believe in justice?" she asked. "I used to." She stared at him a long time. "What do you believe now?" Eli didn't answer right away. He looked at his hands, rough from shoveling a child into the earth. "I believe in you." It wasn't a confession, not quite. More like a shift, a tilt in the world neither of them asked for. Sabria looked away. Her voice, when it came, was tired. Belief didn't save him. "I know," he said, "but it can bury what killed him." She met his eyes, and for the first time, he saw the crack behind the steel, the grief that hadn't been spoken, only carried. She nodded barely, and that was enough. The next morning, they moved east, not to run, but to remember. And Eli left his father's badge at the foot of the grave, buried in silence, beside the boy who had tried to heal something this world never wanted healed. The ridge rose like a question, jagged, sun-bleached, unforgiving. It wasn't a place meant for staying, but it had crevices wide enough to hide 2 breathless bodies, and that was enough. Sabria reached it first. She didn't hesitate, didn't glance back. She climbed like she'd done it before, barefoot and bleeding, hands sure against the rock. Eli followed, slower, still carrying the ache of everything they'd left behind. They found a shelf tucked beneath a lean of stone, shaded by brush and too narrow for horses. There was a spring nearby, faint but real. Water slid from the rocks like a secret. "This place yours?" Eli asked. Sabria shook her head. "Was my mother's once, before fences and deeds and men with pens." She crouched beside the spring, cupped her hands, drank. "She used to bring me here," she said it was where wind went to think. Eli sat nearby, watching the horizon. Dust swirled in the low valley. The riders hadn't turned back. Not yet. "Think they'll find us?" he asked. Sabria didn't answer right away, just ran her fingers along the stone wall beside her, then tapped it once. "Depends how loud we are." Eli smiled, thin. "You're not loud." "No," she said, "but the truth is." That night, they ate what they had, half a heel of bread, 3 juniper berries, and silence. The wind came, slow at first, then bold, dragging ghosts with it. Eli curled beside the stone, coat wrapped tight. Sabria stayed awake, legs tucked, eyes wide, watching shadows shift. She didn't fear the dark, only what light revealed, and in the soft hush of that high ridge, she let herself whisper a name, her brother's, just once, so the wind could carry it home. In Hollow Creek, the truth shriveled before it reached daylight. Folks liked their stories clean, simple, girl with chains, boy with a badge, something wicked in between. By the time the sheriff returned, empty-handed and red-faced, the tale had already warped. She'd hexed a calf, slit a man's throat in sleep, drowned her own kin for secrets. They said Eli followed her because he was cursed too. No one remembered the boy in the shallow grave. No one asked where the bullet came from. The preacher gave a sermon on devils hiding in plain sight. The general store refused to sell salt, said it drew spirits. A woman near the mill braided rosemary into her daughter's hair and muttered, "A witch runs loose, and the law bows to her." Eli's name vanished from the ledger, just gone, like it had never sat beneath his father's. But some folks stayed quiet. Ruth, the deputy, said nothing, just cleaned her rifle slower. The blacksmith's boy, Jory, stood at the jail door one night staring at the chain still bolted to the floor. He touched it, then walked away. Back in the ridge, Eli sat sharpening a branch. Sabria was folding strips of fabric, binding herbs, mixing crushed ash with resin. "You think they're talking?" he asked. She didn't look up. "Talking's easier than thinking." "They'll come?" She nodded. "They always do." Eli sighed. "We're 2 people in a hole." Sabria smiled faintly. "That's how most revolutions start." He blinked. "You trying to start one?" "No," she said, tying the last knot tight, "but I'm damn sure not ending like a footnote." The wind shifted again. This time, it smelled like gunpowder and regret, and Eli, for the first time, didn't look away. He went back alone. Didn't tell Sabria. Didn't leave a note. Just took the old trail west while she was boiling water, and by the time she realized he was gone, his tracks were already fading in the dust. Eli rode into Hollow Creek at dawn. Quiet, head down, badge gone from his chest. The town wasn't awake yet. Just the smell of bread rising and the preacher's bells starting to groan. He didn't go to the jail. He went to the church, stood on the steps, waited. When folks started filling the street, he lifted his voice. Not loud, just steady. They lied. People stopped. Heads turned. "She didn't curse no field. Didn't kill no child. My father shot her brother, a boy, unarmed. I buried him." Someone hissed. A woman covered her ears. The preacher stepped forward, face pale, with fury. "You come here to shame your bloodline?" "No," Eli said. "I came to speak what none of you would." They jeered, called him traitor, fool, said he was bewitched. He didn't answer. He reached into his coat and held up the bullet. Cleaned, marked, pulled from the boy's spine. "This is law?" he asked. "Then I want none of it." Someone threw a stone. It missed. He dropped the bullet at the preacher's feet, then turned and walked away. No one stopped him. No one followed. But one girl, a mute child from the far side of town, slipped out from behind a barrel and pressed something into his hand. A sprig of lavender, bruised, still fragrant. He didn't speak, just nodded, then rode. Back toward the ridge, toward the only place that had ever asked who he was instead of what he wore. Back to where the truth waited, tired, wounded, but alive. They saw the dust before they heard the hooves. A slow-moving cloud, low and mean, crawling up from the flats. Sabria was already packing when Eli rode in. He didn't speak, just handed her the lavender sprig and sat down hard beside the spring. "How many?" she asked. "6, maybe more." "Your father?" He nodded once. She didn't curse, didn't panic, just tied her satchel tighter, looped a strap across her chest, and looked east. "We can take the high trail. They'll expect it." She turned to him. "Then we stay." Eli blinked. "You sure?" She crouched by the brush pile, pulled out a jar of ash-soaked oil, and set it beside a coil of twine. "They came with rope last time," she said. "Let's see how they like fire." They moved fast, no talking, just motion. Eli scattered false tracks toward the arroyo. Sabria masked their trail with crushed sage and pine. They sharpened branches, filled sacks with rock, piled flammables near the canyon mouth. No prayers, no plans, just preparation. As the sun dipped behind the ridge, shadows stretched long and silent. The riders would reach them by nightfall. Sabria crouched behind the blind they'd built with old bark and stubborn roots. Eli sat beside her, fingers tracing the wood stock of his rifle. He only had 2 rounds left. "You regret it?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. "No." The wind picked up again, cold this time. "They'll come hard," she said. He nodded. "Then we don't move." Sabria's voice dropped to a whisper. "Not even if they call us by name." He turned to her, eyes steady, especially then. And in that canyon, silence, something unshakable settled between them. Not fear, not glory, just decision. They waited in the canyon mouth, where the rock narrowed to a spine, and every footstep echoed like a drum. Sabria lay low behind the ledge. Eli crouched just above her, rifle aimed steady, breath measured. They came like thunder, hooves pounding, voices raised, fire licking the tips of their torches. The sheriff led them, face hard, hat low. No words, just vengeance. Eli didn't fire, not yet. They let the first 2 riders pass the marker. Then Sabria struck the oil pot with a lit branch. Flames leapt from the ground like fury itself. Horses reared, men cursed. A rider went down hard, screaming, not from the shot. Eli hadn't fired, but from heat and chaos and the way fear eats order. Still they pressed forward. A bullet tore through the bramble above Eli's head. Another split stone an inch from Sabria's leg. She didn't flinch. She threw her second firebomb into the narrow bend. More flame, more confusion. Then one rider, Ruth, broke through, her rifle up, her aim clean. But she didn't fire. She looked straight at Eli, then lowered the weapon, dropped a bandolier at his feet, then turned her horse and vanished into the smoke. The others faltered. Sabria rose from her hiding place. Her hair whipped in the heat. She held a branch like a spear and stared down the men who had chained her. Eli stepped beside her, rifle raised but not aimed. He said just one word. No. The canyon held its breath. The sheriff's horse shifted beneath him, unsettled. The man barked an order, but no one moved. Not yet. And in that long, sharp silence, firelight flickering off stone and fear, something old died, and something older began to rise. They didn't win, not in the way stories pretend, but they didn't run either. When the smoke cleared, 3 men lay groaning in the dust, burned, bruised, pride bleeding faster than wounds. The others had scattered, dust trails curling back toward town like whiplash. The sheriff stayed the longest, sat on his horse, staring through flame and ash at the sun he no longer claimed. "You really think she's worth it?" he shouted. Eli didn't answer, just lowered the rifle and stepped between the fire and Sabria. "She's not a thing," he said. That landed like a hammer, not just in the canyon, but in the bones of every man still holding a gun. The sheriff's jaw clenched. He looked at Sabria like she was smoke. "You'll hang for this," he growled. She took one step forward. "You tried that already." Eli watched his father's hand twitch near the holster, but it didn't rise. Not this time. "Go," Eli said, "before the canyon remembers your name." It wasn't a threat. It was a reckoning. The sheriff turned, rode out slow, alone. By dusk, the canyon was quiet again. The wind sifted through scorched bramble and blackened stone. Eli stood watch while Sabria dug, not graves, a place for roots. She planted juniper near the ridge, hands in ash, whispering names no one else would ever say aloud. Eli didn't ask what they meant. He just brought water. And when she looked up, hands filthy, face streaked with soot and memory, he saw something he hadn't before. She wasn't rebuilding, she was replanting. And the ridge wasn't their hiding place anymore. It was home, built not by walls, but by standing still when the world tried to erase them. Word didn't travel fast. It traveled sharp. By the third morning, a preacher's wife claimed her cough returned the moment the witch vanished. A drunk at the saloon said he saw lightning strike the ridge twice, a sign from heaven. But others spoke softer. Said the sheriff turned pale when asked what happened. Said Ruth left town with her rifle and never came back. Said Eli's name wasn't erased anymore. It just couldn't be spoken without shame. Back in the canyon, Sabria hung a strip of cloth on a bent nail outside the cave. Torn from the coat Eli gave her, sun-bleached now, frayed at the edge. She didn't say what it meant. Eli didn't ask. Instead, he built a bench from cedar and old railwood, placed it under the ledge where the wind sang different every hour. It was Ruth who returned first, not with a gun, with a child, sick, weak, afraid of men. Sabria took her in without question. Then came the blacksmith's boy, then a woman who'd once spat near Sabria's feet, then two brothers with scars down their backs, and no one left to name them. They came not because they believed in magic, but because something in the ridge didn't ask for proof. It just offered space. Sabria taught them how to listen to plants, how to boil root, how to wait without breaking. Eli taught them how to aim a rifle, but hold it like it should never be fired. Nobody called it a sanctuary. But the fire stayed lit through the night, and the sign outside wasn't carved in wood. It was written in breath, in silence, in people who finally stopped running and stood. There wasn't a name for what they built. Not clinic, not church, not homestead, just a place where nobody had to lie about what hurt. They slept under patched canvas, ate stew from tin bowls. The spring kept running, the fire kept low, and every night, someone new found the ridge. A mother with a bruised arm, a boy who stuttered, a man too tired to keep swinging his fists. They were not saints. They were the ones left after the story ended. Eli still sat on the same rock each night, sharpening sticks into stakes, watching the canyon edge like it might change its mind. But his shoulders weren't tense anymore. He no longer reached for the rifle when footsteps neared. Sabria moved quieter now, not because she was hiding, but because she didn't have to explain. She'd hang herbs by the ledge, draw symbols in the dirt, whisper names into the fire. They weren't spells, they were stories. She never removed the cloth from the nail, never renamed herself. But one morning, as dawn slid soft across the rocks, she hammered a second nail beside the first, hung another strip, this one from Eli's old shirt. He watched her do it, didn't ask. But later, as they sat side by side near the spring, she said it anyway, because it wasn't just me they tried to erase. He nodded. They won't. And neither of them smiled, but both stayed. And maybe that's the truth most stories miss. That justice isn't always a hanging. Sometimes it's just two people who refuse to run, still breathing, still building, still here,